life can hit like a sledgehammer. But guess what? We hit back harder. Welcome to Affirm That Sh. Somehow I Thrived. I'm Jennifer Rogers, your no BS guide to turning life's toughest moments into badass victories. Ready to flip the script? Let's affirm that life can be a bitch, but somehow we thrive. Welcome to today's episode of Affirm That Shit. Somehow I Thrived. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share because today's episode will have you on the edge of your seat with Miss Elizabeth Hudson, a spiritual life coach, yoga instructor, and founder of the Sexual Alchemy podcast. Elizabeth work guides us through embodiment, energetic healing, and the sacred reclamation of self. She invites us to explore the transformational power of truth, presence, and sensuality in the pursuit of wholeness. Before we meet Elizabeth, we've got her affirmations. So I invite you now, in your space and place, to repeat these with us. I am a vessel for sacred sensuality, awakening divine remembrance in others. I am a vessel for sacred sensuality, awakening divine remembrance in others. I am a vessel for sacred sensuality, awakening divine remembrance in others. I remember that myth and metaphor are mirrors. Through story, I reflect the soul of a people. I remember that myth and metaphor are mirrors. Through story, I reflect the soul of a people. I remember that myth and metaphor are mirrors. Through story, I reflect the soul of a people. I rise above low vibrations by aligning with compassion, creativity, and conscious vision. I rise above low vibrations by aligning with compassion, creativity, and conscious vision. I rise above low vibrations by aligning with compassion, creativity, and conscious vision. Stay with us. After this break, we'll meet Elizabeth.
Imagine a space where you let go, where the clamor of the world quiets and you meet your truest self. At Yukio, through sound vibrations, Reiki, and the wisdom of tarot, we help you release what no longer serves you, align with your energy, and renew your spirit. Begin your journey back to yourself today.
Welcome to today's episode of Affirm That Shit with our guest of honor, Elizabeth. Elizabeth, thank you for being here today.
Jennifer, thank you so much. It's really an honor to connect with you.
Oh, it is my pleasure to host. I'll tell you, I've been looking forward to this and watching you on social media and the path that you're on and what you're doing for others in the spiritual community is unlike anything that I've seen. And for you to shine that light, I know that you've got a story behind it that you've walked through. So where is your story taking us today?
For sure. Thank you. Yes. And I'll tell you, having started my podcast right at the brink of the pandemic, while I was in the middle of a divorce, I would never have imagined I would be doing a podcast about sacred sexuality. If someone had told me, that would have sounded absolutely insane. And yet, when we are called by spirit to rise up and help and serve, we answer the call as illogical or irrational as it may seem. So that's really what was going on with me at the time. I was a Kundalini yoga teacher, a mother of two. I was in a marriage of, at that point, about 15 years, and was certainly not feeling sacredly sexual or aligned in those ways. And yet, there was this call to talk about sexuality as sacred, creative energy as the energy of the creator flowing through us, and undoing a lot of the shame and the distortion of the way sexuality is often understood in our society. So it really wasn't something that was talked about much in my spiritual community. So I was a Kundalini yoga teacher, and if you know anything about that, there's a whole story behind that. But Kundalini, I should explain, Kundalini energy in and of itself is the life force energy at the base of our spine. It is the atomic energy that can rise up within us that evokes that heart connection, which is that feeling of euphoria, nirvana, ecstasy, and which is really being in flow with Creator, with divine energy. And so the technology of Kundalini yoga, which is far predates Yogi Bhajan, who kind of brought it here to the West, is the technology of opening up ourselves to that energy and allowing ourselves to be in the flow. So it's Kriya, which are exercises, meditation, mantra, to give you the experience and the embodiment of that connection. Similarly, as we've seen with other practices like this, the leader ended up abusing his power. It's become a bit of a cliche, unfortunately, but lo and behold, we found ourselves in that same position in the Kundalini world. At the time, it was deeply heartbreaking for me because I really had felt an alignment with that man, but I didn't ever hold him as a guru. I held him as a teacher. I didn't idolize him, but I did have a respect for what he had taught us. However, I also understand that the knowledge wasn't unique to him, and it was certainly something that he was just a conduit of. But the gift in recognizing that someone can be imperfect, right, is that you take down that idolization. And in doing so, you step into that role. You no longer have to have a teacher, a priest, a guru, a figurehead between you and source. And there's a graduation in that. What it asks you, therefore, to do is to step into your own alignment, into your own empowerment. And what if I were the one that is directly receiving and can help, right? And in that way, we have to rise to the challenge and realize that all of us, not just us who call ourselves teachers or spiritual leaders in some sense, that we're always all teachers, we're always all students. And the necessary humility of that has to be a constant, that we are always flawed, we are human, but we are also always divine. We are always also sparks of source. And so in that space, me stepping into talking about sexuality, which was something that was always kind of skipped over in the Kundalini practice, because I think there was a lot of maybe confusion and hypocrisy. But, the creative energy at the sacral chakra, which is where the word sacred comes from, is our link to source. And the more we can understand how we can consciously connect to our sexuality, while first and foremost removing shame, that is the biggest thing. Shame is one of the lowest vibrations. It keeps us locked in an illusion. And when we can rid ourselves from that shame and relate to our sexuality as divine energy and consciously connecting through the heart chakra in alignment with the sacral energy, that's where I don't even believe human beings have fully understood where we can go with that. Yes. And once we start to, so if we can just, I always kind of use we're still in a deficit as a collective. We're still in this energy that sex is naughty and it should be bad and we should feel somewhat ashamed about it. And then we see all that distortion with uh, a lot of, I mean, for lack of a better word, perversion, right? Abuse, trauma, uh, that sexuality becomes something flippant or um, overly pornified, right? So we go from that repressed, we don't, sexuality is something shameful, nobody talks about, to what we see now in a lot of culture is this porn culture, which is really new in the last 30 years. That suddenly you can open your phone and see the most graphic, images and depictions, to how that bleeds into our culture, right? And how young girls start making TikTok videos that are as blatantly sexual, and the lyrics in mainstream pop music are graphically sexual, right? So it's not to say that sexual expression is bad in any way, but it's all about bringing consciousness to it. Is it about heart centered connection? Is it about love? Is it about empowerment versus power? And those are different.
Elizabeth, I want to pause right there because this is something that has been heavy in my life, even is that, the shame, because a lot of times when a woman has been a victim of sexual abuse or trauma, you always hear, well, they won't come to court, they won't share anything, they won't. And what happens on the flip side of that is because her past is brought up and used against her. Oh, she became promiscuous. She became these things. Instead of maybe, no, she was a woman who was in touch with who she is and she loved these experiences. And now
Mhm.
you have something that has rocked her and you want to use something against her. So I love what you're saying here about let's own this, let's change the narrative. And I'm sure, like you and myself, you go through school, you get this public education, right? And they come in and they're like, "Oh, here's the sex talk. Here's what we have going on." And that is nothing like the conversations we should be having with each other. So as you're navigating us through this shame and what is true, how can we begin to reclaim ourselves when we've been fractured by that narrative or that trauma?
Yes. The reclamation is as simple as remembering. And what I mean by that is we come in as souls knowing. We get distorted in the same way as a piece of silver may build up uh, tarnish, right? As little children, we knew we didn't carry shame. We didn't carry the burden of the third dimensional uh, distortions. And so we just have to go back to that space of self acceptance and love and connection to source. And it's all there. So that reclamation is really, it's your birthright to feel pleasure and to have a physical body to enjoy it and to love with your heart and feel pleasure with the sacral chakra. The To your point, Jennifer, about the way women are shamed for our sexual energy, that is a whole other topic, and that's really a big issue in what I'm seeking to address and to heal. The control of women's bodies is universal. It is multicultural. It is multi-religious. It is uh, insidious, and it's overt in some ways, and it's subtle in others. To your point, well, what was she wearing, as if somehow rape was deserved or somehow abuse was elicited by the female. That's a long narrative of, that we need to cover up or feel shame for inherently being temptresses. Uh,
Mhm.
and the truth of that is none of that's true. And being women being able to enjoy their sexuality in their own right, right? I mean, we look at cultures that do female genital mutilation, right? Because it's the idea that we can then control the woman if she doesn't get to feel pleasure, if she can somehow be, just simply a sheath for the male genitalia. That's an extreme way that this is played out in the third dimension, right? But there are much more subtle ways that that's also played out. And one of the biggest things we have to look at too are the ways that we are complicit as women without even realizing it, right? So there's a lot of that, I call it collective Stockholm syndrome, where we play into that narrative without even realizing it. And that's can be more subtle, but it's unfortunately doesn't help men, right? So it's we are equally damaged by it, although it seems as if the masculine benefits. But truly, when we're out of alignment with the real balance of the masculine and feminine energies, right? Which is the coming together of that binary that creates life, right? Um, we don't understand the true purpose of our empowerment as women. And once we start to remember, I will go back to that word remember, then we all benefit. Then we have the opportunity to evolve. And it may seem like that's a very far-fetched notion that we could suddenly all start to heal. But what if we did, right? What if we start to unravel shame? What if we started to uh, heal from trauma or abuse? And then what? And then start to align with our divine self. I truly believe that that is the evolutionary um, possibility for human beings. And I want to also emphasize that that does not mean that you have to be specifically male or female, that we accept all um, different interpretations and experiences of sexuality, and that it's all as long as we are healed and healthy and happy, accepted and important.
Yes, healed and healthy, especially
Yes,
because there's so much more that harm that can happen if you're not operating within those spectrums
absolutely.
to
Absolutely.
yourself and to others. So, what, Elizabeth, are some of your non negotiables then as you're moving through this spiritual alignment and healing yourself?
Yeah. So to your point also about sexual abuse, unfortunately, it is such a common thing. So many people have a version of that. And, you know, it is much more talked about nowadays, thank God. But it's so important to realize that that's a lot of people's stories, and it certainly was mine. Um, and watching how that plays into your own definition of your sexuality and the ways that you play that out as you grow older. Um, my journey with that has pushed me into this passion for helping others, right? So we always look at what was the wound, and therefore what that the medicine is in the wound sometimes, right? um I feel that when people heal whatever distortion they're suffering from, there's enormous possibility in that. There's enormous outcome that will shift, and there's a ripple effect that plays forward to others.
I appreciate you sharing a piece of yourself with us in that because that is some true honesty and true work. And I have that history in my background as well. And so you make decisions on what you're going to do with your life and your experience, right?
Yep.
And I can tell you one of the lies that I used to tell myself for the longest time was my body betrayed me. Because
Mm,
you're when you're a young little girl and these things are being done to you, your body is responding. And in that moment, it feels good, right? You don't understand what's happening, but the
right.
body is responding. And
Yep.
those things that are crossing boundaries, they still feel good to the body, to the physical body. And
Yep.
I had to sit with that lie for a long time. My
Yes.
body betrayed me. It wasn't my body that done it. It was a person that done
Yep.
it.
Yeah.
And there's so many men and women that have experienced this that in that moment in time have told ourselves lies like that. And so I appreciate you opening this conversation up and challenging us to go in, dig deep, and own, get back, reconnect, because it is your birthright to feel good. It is your birthright to feel pleasure without that guilt, without that shame. And so you opening this door, there's going to be so many that want to come in and feel this release and this experience. And as you said, the remembrance.
Yeah. And, holding compassion for that little girl who thought it was her fault,
Mm.
right? Somehow that, she somehow invoked this or should feel bad that she even enjoyed it, knowing that it was wrong, right? Et cetera. Again, that's part of, an example of that kind of Stockholm syndrome, right? That you kind of took that on like, oh, I guess I should feel bad about this. This is somehow my fault. And the truth is, the bigger question we should be asking is, why is this so common? Why is this so common? I mean, what on earth is going on that this becomes something that so many people have to endure and overcome? So I guess part of my passion for having this podcast and having conversations around this is putting that out there, lobbing that out to the collective to say, what's going on? And how do we shift this? How do we heal this? Because this is a sickness that we cannot tolerate anymore. And it's, you look at the big picture of the social landscape. What is the quickest way to bring a man down, right? Typically, a man in power. Open his Pandora's box. What's he doing behind the scenes? What's he doing in hotel rooms? What's he doing to underage girls? What's he doing, in glory holes, in pit stop bathrooms? It is often the sacral chakra and the distortion of it, the perversion of it, the confusion of it that takes a man down or takes a power figure down. So the truth is, the shadow, right, in the Jungian sense, the ways that we are not taught to allow our sexuality in healthy ways, right? The perfect example of that being the Catholic Church. So these priests are meant to be celibate, and yet it's a natural desire to have sexual wants, and then that gets pushed down and then distorted into pedophilia. So again, we have to start to look at what are the ways that we're not being healthy around sexuality in our society, and how do we start to heal? How do we start to help men who have desires that are then pushed into pedophilia, rape, abuse, grab them by the pussy, whatever you want to call it, right? Ways that we get unhealthy, for lack of a better word.
Unhealthy. And
Yeah,
I think we do it even before they reach that manhood, because these aren't things that they just all of a sudden started pushing down. These are probably feelings that they had or experiences that they've had that they have been just holding on to from adolescence through those teen years, through that testosterone filled era when they're trying to figure out their own bodies. I
absolutely.
think the conversation has to start young, you know.
Thank you. And to your point about that one sex talk that everybody has, right? So when I coach my clients and when I work with, raising my own children, the sexual conversation was in an appropriate way from when they were young. These are your sexual organs. This is what's appropriate. Pleasure is your birthright. Ways that they can look at their sexuality without just, oh, wow, mom's so uncomfortable with this, dad's so uncomfortable with this. I guess this is something I should feel uncomfortable about, right? So some
Right.
of that is, on us. We have to start to go, all right, I have to do my own healing so that I'm not going to let that trickle down to my children and give them permission to feel safe, first and foremost, safe, and not put them in situations where something might happen. Obviously, be very vigilant about what play dates they go on, what sleepovers, etc. But also really give them an opportunity to feel healthy about their sexuality, and that has to come from us, and we have to do our own healing first. And that's the hard part. It's not a once one and done thing. It's a process.
It's a process and it goes on for years, even beyond our childbearing and raising years. We're still healing, but keeping that door open.
Absolutely.
And I'm on the same parental path that you were. We were open. We know that you're going to be doing these things. Let's have some safety boundaries in line, and let's just have a conversation other than just the awkward birds and bees that you see on TV, parents sitting on the edge of the bed and actually end up learning something from the kid, right? It's crazy. But we've got that obligation to ourselves and to our children to open this conversation, to make it a safe place so that when things are crossed, they can come to us and share, and we can continue to heal, and we can feel that pleasure that so many of us need in our life. And so, Elizabeth, as we get ready to wrap up today, how can those that have heard you, seen you, connected here today on this podcast, how can they follow you or reach out and work with you?
Thank you. Yeah, so I work one-on-one with clients as a coach. That can be done over Zoom or in person. So Elizabeth-Hudson.com is my website, and you can book directly there or follow me on Instagram at Elizabeth.Hudson11.
Thank you for your time, and thank you to those listening and watching today.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. It really was a pleasure.
You just took another step towards owning your story and thriving against all odds. This is Affirm That Shit. Somehow I thrived. If you're ready to keep kicking ass, subscribe now and let's keep breaking barriers together. Remember, life's a battle, but somehow you'll thrive.